For the first time, I'm doing a few things here. I'm trying to roughly target a game's release window. I'm doing a AAA release at the same time, which I've done AAA a little bit, but not a ton. And I'm reviewing an MMO. Oddly enough, I've played a ton of MMO games in my time. My top 3 genres are RTS, Tycoon, and MMO, but I've never actually decided to review one of these before, seeing as I was going to do WoW Classic when it launched, because I'd pretty much played the entire game top to bottom up until Phase 3. I did every dungeon, raid, battleground, but the idea and the task of reviewing Classic was far beyond my capability at the time, and I felt like it wouldn't have been a good thing for me to do because I wouldn't have been able to give it a fair, objective review due to the extreme case of rose-tinted glasses I was wearing at the time. New World comes at a time when we're actually kind of undergoing an MMO renaissance. MMOs all rushed to try and emulate even 10% of WoW's success up through the release of the Lich King expansion, after all the other developers saw the fiscal reports from Blizzard. It seemed like every company was making an MMO, but nowadays they're only just now kind of coming back after several years of scarcity. New World is not one of the cash grabs from before. They actually tried to make something different. Originally, I wasn't going to review New World after backing out on Classic WoW a little while back, so at launch of New World I wasn't really recording a whole lot of footage. This is why I kind of start at a relatively high level and not from square one in the video. But one thing I noticed from basically every review that's been publicized so far is they all claim New World has horrendous queue times to play, that the game is a broken, buggy mess, and that a ton of servers are inevitably going to die in a month because Amazon, instead of making their servers hold more people, they dumped a ton of servers to the list. More on these topics later, but this was my inspiration to make the video. The first thing you will notice about New World is how the game looks. Tons of foliage on the ground and high quality textures in most areas. It's a great looking game, the colors are bright and vibrant. It all goes together really well. Some of the later zones are actually dark and moody. They look great and really fit their theme and the overall dark swampness extremely well. Characters and NPCs are well animated, well textured. They all act as you would expect and they look great. Next is sound in New World. The actual effects are all relatively average. Nothing really stands out in quality as good or bad. The mixing is good. I haven't heard anything play weirdly at times or when it's not supposed to. There's like an idle soundtrack that runs in the background of the game, but it's pretty much just ambient soundtrack. There's a few standout ones, but for the most part, they're average. But how does New World play? Well, the combat for an MMO is actually quite good. It's medium to fast-paced overall, has a decent feedback to the player, but compared to other strictly action, like single-player games, it really doesn't hold up well. You can't ladder skills into each other, for example. Most games that have this style of combat will let you do, like, for example, 3 light attacks into 1 heavy attack to create, like, a unique chain based off of how many of each you do and in what order. New World doesn't have that, so most of the time you'll just be spamming light attacks and dodging hits. Ranged weapons are all skill shots in the game though, which is really cool. It adds a lot of dynamic to combat since most people use at least a ranged weapon. You can use 2 weapons on your character, so it makes sense to have 1 melee, 1 ranged. One thing that's neat is bows can't be used from the prone position, but you can with guns, which is really cool. Overall UI in New World is a mixed bag. The map will have markers to track quests to show you which area you need to go to complete a quest, but this is strictly just a pin on the map that shows a vague sense of where you are to go. It's not like other MMOs, or mods for other MMOs, where it'll mark out like a region, like a bubble on the map for the quest. But it doesn't really pinpoint, it's in this general area. You also can't track that many quests. It's kind of annoying because you could sometimes pick up like 5 to 8 quests in a town, and you really can only track, I think it's like 6. There's a compass at the top of your screen that essentially replaces the mini-map from other MMOs. It has markers on it to track resources like ores, trees, animals, and they'll also have map markers for landmarks and quests as well. It's kind of annoying because it bugs out a lot, but when you're not in a group, it works fine, interestingly, and it's great. One interesting design choice is that you can't open your inventory while you're moving. This is kind of annoying for somebody like me, seeing as I will regularly open my bags in an MMO to track what I've gathered, quest items, etc, etc. This is because the inventory is also the character sheet. So when you open it, your character turns and looks at the camera, and at the bottom left it shows your actual stats. Well, the character turning around to look at the camera to make this look nice is what stops you from running. Crafting and trade skills are a huge part of New World, and like many others, it's a mixed bag. Anybody can do any of the professions, and if you wanted to, you could level every single one of them to the max of 200. This reminds me of a lot of single-player RPGs for comparison. However, doing something like this would be awful, since in the case of refined woods and metals, you have to ladder the previous one into the next one. Basically, for each tier of upgrade, it requires the previous tier, a fluxer like a refining agent like sandpaper, and then one other thing. Basically, you find these fluxes, refining agents like sandpaper, in lootable crates that are inside of towns. A lot of these are actually in questing locations you'll be sent to, but they're a random resource crate and can drop any of these trade skill materials, so there's no easy way to farm just the one you want. Later on, you can unlock converters, but really they're not cost effective since they're not reusable, and it costs 20 of the other material to make 15 of the one that you want, and of course will consume the other material that you probably needed for a different crafting anyways. Oh, and did I mention that it uses a lot of this stuff too? Now this may not sound too bad, but let's break down the system and why it kinda sucks. Iron comes from iron ore, pretty simple. Steel is 2 iron bars, flux, and a charcoal. The flux comes from crates. Not so bad. Next is star metal, which requires 2 steel bars, so 4 iron bars and 2 fluxes for that, charcoal, and another flux, bringing the random dropped requirement of flux up to 3 by going up 1 tier to star metal. Orichalcum is 2 star metal bars, so now that takes the flux up to 7 of this super tedious material that is awful to grind. These trade skill items are also not in big drop quantities either. Without using any before doing steel and looting every box I saw, I only got roughly 400, and if you're leveling armor crafting, you can get away with it by making leather armor, but if you're making weapons, it takes hundreds of bars per tier to upgrade to the next one. There's also precious metals too. 1 flux 2 silver bars for gold, 1 flux 2 gold bars for platinum. These materials being random drop make it impossible to specifically farm just that one. It really should have been a rock you mine or something that they did a different way if they wanted to use this back tiering system to progress. It actually makes you not want to do it since you will always have to farm iron and silver to do anything, and it makes you feel like you've never actually progressed from it. However, the whole idea as to why this system works is so that people will always have a reason to gather the lower tier stuff because the top tier stuff will still need it. This will also give a supply and a value to these items. One thing that's really annoying about each item you craft is that it's very slow. It gives you this, oh my god, you did it page every single item you make. This isn't really skippable either since it does it with every single item and requires a button press to skip a tiny part of it, but not all of it. What most people end up doing is just sitting there mashing their spacebar for 10 minutes since making lower tier stuff that doesn't require these higher tier metals and stuff is more efficient material. It takes more time, but who wants to farm this stupid flux when I can go cut trees for days? Why does it work this way? If I hold the button, it's slower. Something I don't notice many other people are covering in New World is questing. It's just kind of glossed over, and it's one of the most mixed bags of the game. On one hand, the main story quest is really good. It sends you around the globe. There's actual handcrafted side quests that are pretty decent and will send you on MMO-esque missions. But meanwhile, there's faction board and town board missions that are Preston Gravy level of bad design. They're basically repeatable quests in the worst form. A lot of the times it's just a looping quest that's super basic. Like, kill 3 of these things, but we don't actually tell you where they are. They don't mark your map at all with these. You Google to see where they are, they're on the other side of the world, and they're in a region that's 10 level higher than the one in the town that you're in. Other times they'll be like, give me 90 iron bars, and I'll give you 5 gold. What a deal. If questing around in different zones, exploring the world is your main MMO attraction, you probably won't like New World a whole lot, since a lot of the side quests are nothing new and the only standout is really the main storyline. One thing MMO people will like to see is they did add dungeons. They're called expeditions. I like them so far, but at the end of the first one, the boss hits so hard that even with the tank, you gotta run. Like, whoever has aggro has to kite him in a big circle until the boss is dead while everybody shoots him.
Shit.
You can do it so fast.
The one keeps flying through the air. I'm stabbing him, Dism, but we're not winning.
Trying to push me off the side basement.
You should move back. If he pushes you off the side, you'll fall to your fucking death.
Yeah, be careful with that.
Yeah, like you should like get back here. Like keep running back. Or not. I'm gonna go over here and shoot it. You can get knocked off the side.
I'm fine with that. Not in the middle of the bridge.
He just puked on me. There he is.
Holy shit, that did a lot of damage.
Hey, Nick.
What are you, dying?
Yeah.
Boom! I used to, yeah.
You see a little block and dodge again.
Call an ambulance!
No! He's down!
Rick, did you have
Get him
any
up!
signal?
Shockwave. Fire resistant, you guys says.
Oh shit. Back here.
Invasions are like party quests from other MMOs. Basically, from time to time, invaders will open up a node and you go there and close it, and actually this is where I've gotten some of my best item rewards. The map in New World is huge. Starting out, there's 4 starter zones and a ton more for you to explore. For whatever reason, these starter zones, you don't get to pick which one you start at. For the longest time, people would play with their friends as they would just remake characters over and over until you spawn at the same spot. It really doesn't change the game that much, but it can put huge gaps between you. And some of the starter zones are better than others, seeing as you get area rep through the map, through the zone you're in, and it gives you bonuses like cheaper taxes or maybe better quest gains. Player guilds can actually control these zones too. Through wars and fighting for a faction, the guild will govern the zone and even collect taxes on it. The faction missions previously mentioned will raise your intel and influence over an enemy-controlled zone or reduce the enemies in your faction-controlled zones. After a while, a guild can declare war on another if the influence and intel becomes enough. This is pretty cool, seeing as PvP was definitely a focus in New World, but then the actual fight for the zone is locked behind a 50v50 instanced battle for 30 minutes. This is pretty weak, since basically everybody on the faction will sign up, but only the attacking and defending guilds get to pick who they take. So unless your guild is attacking or defending, it's unlikely they're going to take you, since they're going to take their guys first. What's really stupid about this being instances, each zone has a fort that can be fought over in a completely totally open world PvP battle by taking and holding a flag. I really don't understand why they would lock territory control down to an instance thing so hard. I bet the overwhelming majority of players would try if it was in an open war, and if it was almost always all of them, they would stop whichever faction from zerging, because then you would have a lot better organization. I guess that's probably the point, is they don't want the Zerg guilds to take everything. So, I don't know. One thing that's missing from the map, or even, like, anything in general with the territory control, is capital cities. Every MMO, like, has this. You mean to tell me everybody in New World lives in a little log wall settlement that's like little shanties and shacks? Where's the huge cities? Player customization is pretty extreme in New World as well. Like I said before, anybody can do any of the crafting, but this also goes for the weapons too. Anybody can use any armor, weapons, or equipment, with each weapon having a different talent tree that's exclusive to itself. You get XP to actually level the weapon. It gives you a little bit better stats, and it lets you pick from these talent trees, which each one has about 2 trees to pick from. The fact that it doesn't tie you down to a weapon really encourages you to try different things. However, the stats you get are freeform selected through your choice, so switching from magic to sword might not work out because there's now a whole lot of stat crossover, but if you have ones that do crossover, it'll probably work just fine. Now back to one of the first things I mentioned in the intro, the server queues. A lot of people have expressed a significant level of discontent for the wait times at launch and for the entire first week. This was made worse by the fact that AWS, Amazon Web Services, is one of the biggest server hosts in the entire world. They didn't just sit idle though, they did several measures to try to lower the queue times. For starters, any full server wouldn't let you make a new character on it. This kind of sucks because what if you had somebody join late, now your whole group has to move or that person misses out. Another way that they tried to mitigate the queues was they added a boatload of servers. On launch day, they already had quite a few East Coast servers, but then they started seeing these queues and dumped 80 more at the same time. However, during this time, there was 850,000 people playing the game on Steam, and each server only holds about 2,000 people. Between locking down full servers and opening up hundreds of servers worldwide, by the weekend following the release, the queues were basically a thing of the past. A lot of people were very angry about this, and it's the main reason why I waited to do the review when I decided to do it. I want to make sure that anybody who watched my video and decided they wanted to buy the game actually could go and play it. A lot of people have heavily criticized the 2,000 player limits on servers, saying that it's far too low and that they should have raised the amount of players per server instead of adding more to prevent these additional knee-jerk reaction servers from dying out over time to meet the insane demand that they were faced with at the time. The main reason why they kept the max players per server so low is so that way it didn't get oversaturated with players in the world. I'm sure they did their research, and anybody who's actually followed the Classic WoW launch would for sure understand why they made this decision. At launch, there was players lining up and taking turns killing named monsters so they could complete a quest. This was with layering that Blizzard added to every single server. If you're not familiar, basically every server with layers was multiple servers. There was multiple worlds running simultaneously alongside each other so that once the hype died down, they could normalize the server levels by phasing these layers out instead of servers. It estimated that each layer was about 3,000 players in Classic, and I know tons of servers had at least 5. The Burning Crusade Classic was practically unplayable for the first week, even with layers. The first zone that you go to is Hellfire Peninsula, and it was totally packed full of players on every single layer. The server I was playing on had 11, and there still wasn't enough. At least in New World, with the 2,000 player limit and everybody being sort of spread out, once you made it through the queue, you could actually play the game. The Burning Crusade Classic launch had some queues at first, with the layers, and yeah, it was better than if they just launched servers and they died, but I don't know. I think New World made the right call. My New World server was a wait time of about an hour and a half. I agree that this is way too long, but this was an impossible solution for Amazon to solve, making at least somebody mad. I mean, look at the EU servers. Who would have known they would have had almost 500,000 people waiting in line? They had 400,000 people waiting on launch day to play the game. I'm sure they didn't even have half of that in the actual servers. Imagine if these people were in like 100 servers instead of a couple hundred servers. These servers would have been fucked, and nobody would have been able to play the game at all. Everything would have been instantly killed, harvested, gathered the second it spawns. There's some story in New World, but it's pretty forgettable, honestly. I don't really even remember what's going on while I'm still playing the game. There's an invasion of monsters, hold up, I'll go get my gun. One thing that's actually really odd in New World that's not really related to anything is the chat is global. So this could be good and bad. People on my server are just 24/7 shit talking each other, and there's actually like heated debates over politics. It's really stupid. New World at one point was allegedly, maybe, probably, bricking some high-end RTX graphics cards. For example, to be more specific, the RTX 3090 is the one that people reported the most. Other YouTubers have done actually testing on these theories, and if you're interested in this topic, I'd recommend you go watch the Jay's 2 cents video on it, since he found some very interesting results on very specific GPUs. Overall, it seems to be a very small sample size of people having issues, and speaking of small sample sizes, my friend community has 7 3080s, and we haven't had a single problem. So, fake news. A lot of other reviewers are bashing New World for its bugs, saying it's a completely unplayable buggy mess. And I'll say there's some here and there, like the compass dying, but overall it's not so bad. Some people are comparing the launch of New World to Cyberpunk, and that was absolutely not my experience at all. It's very likely that these bugs and issues that people are pointing out that personally I never saw in the game are actually pretty quickly fixed, seeing as Amazon seems to be committing heavily to New World. They even got the approval of J. Ol. Beasy. Right now, New World has a cash shop, but it's pretty limited. It's just emotes and skins, and I sure as hell hope it stays this way. $40 no sub really helps more sales happen, but at $20 though. And I'm sure they'd love to add level boosts and other things like that to try to cash in, but I hope they don't. It looks like Amazon plans and expects even to support the game with more growth and additional content over time. And at the top of the map, there's obvious areas that are inaccessible right now to the main world, but are clearly marked to be at a later time. There was even a handful of new possible weapons data mined, so it's all but confirmed that they have a pretty decent post-launch plans for the game to keep making content for it. All in all, everything said, I'm at about 50 hours played, and I'm only level 32. Unless you skip a ton of farming and just do leveling as a PvEer, you will absolutely have plenty to do, but that's just the normal grind. If you're a PvPer, you'll have even more to do, since there's a lot of power struggle will frequently keep you busy. But at $40, New World is a steal with the amount of game you get, no matter which side you fall on. It's not the most polished experience or the best combat that I've ever seen, but it does about 80% of things at an average or above average level. So as long as they don't fuck it up with the cash shop and corporate meddling, I think New World will be a good game to buy for a long time. As always, thank you for watching the video. If you liked the video, leave a like. If you have a comment to leave maybe a suggestion, feedback on the video, or just wanted to comment on the game, do so.